And we're back in the studio with me having a cold, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your early Sunday evening here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. So I don't get sick very often. You can insert whatever joke you want. You're always sick. You're a sick fuck. That's a sick question. You're a sick fuck. Joe Pesci, Raging Bull. But I don't get colds very often, maybe once a year on average. Um, I have been blessed with, generally speaking, very good health. So when something goes wrong, my throat started feeling funny the other day. Well, I don't know what to do. I'm not really that great at being sick. It's never pleasant, but I just happen to be worse at it than the average person, I would say. But I don't. When I'm under the weather, um, I tend to get philosophical, melancholy even. And I started thinking about the life that I thought I was going to have versus the life that I have had up to this point. And the amazing thing is, to cut past the chase and skip to the outcome. There was a point in my early 20s where I was convinced, and not self belief, I was convinced because of other people who I was working with. I was convinced that I was going to become a super successful screenwriter, somebody who writes for movies. And that was going to be my career path and my life path. Seeing my name up on screen, story by, when you're a first time writer, unless maybe it's the independent route, but generally speaking, you're not going to get full credit. You might have story by, and then 8 other writers will rewrite it and rewrite it, especially if you go through the studio process. But I imagined my life was going to be that I was going to make a lot of money, which, thanks to my dear old dad, I didn't really have any pressure on me. He was very good. He allowed me to pursue my dreams, to kind of chase the fairy tale of screenwriting success, so to speak. So I was never really under the gun as a much younger person. He gave me unlimited amounts of rope. So don't worry about it, Jared. Just, he didn't talk like that, but this was the gist of what I got from him. So I thought that I was going to, at least have a couple of screenplays get produced. And I worked at it. I worked in that business. I would say on the outer edges of the business would be more accurate. But I've written a total of 14 screenplays. I was hired for 2 projects, one of which got somewhat close. The other one never really became what it was supposed to be when I was brought on board. And then I had screenplays which were optioned. The story I told about Kevin Costner, and Elijah Wood was interested in one of them, and all of this kind of activity. But nothing ever hit to the point where I could light a victory cigar. Let's put it that way. But here's the plot twist of my own life. And we see this now. There is a lot of talk. There's a lot of talk not just about woke ideology or toxic masculinity versus woke ideology. And nobody really knows what those phrases mean, because if you asked 100 people right now, 100 well-read people, I like to think I'm at least somewhat well-read. I don't know that I would go as far as say well-read. But if you ask them to define what is woke ideology, you're not going to get more than a couple of people answering it the same way. And the same with toxic masculinity. It doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. People have a general idea is what it means to them. So I struggled to connect with people as a younger person because I was not diagnosed. All the talk about autism, and I don't like getting political on this podcast. I am not, now that I'm not interested, but this is not a politics podcast. But if I had been born 15 years later, I would have almost immediately, at age 3, I would have been diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum. Now, that has never been done. I have never officially been diagnosed. I'm just giving you what I get out of this. And my dad, the same way. My dad was very clearly neurodivergent. There were things he was spectacular at. And then there were things that weren't that difficult that he struggled with. Now, I struggled more with the not difficult stuff than he did, because he had the sort of tunnel vision. He was actually good at a whole bunch more stuff than me. We think of, and now my dad unfortunately is gone, but we think of certain people from certain generations, well, they're probably not good at this or this or this. My dad was one of those people, just like his father, Grandpa Nat. He was great at almost everything he tried, but he was focused on certain things, and there were a lot of other activities he would have been good at, he just didn't get into because he couldn't see past it. But as a much younger person, I struggled to connect with people. And this was a recurring thing in my life from when I was pre-K, nursery school, and moving forward throughout my scholastic life. Now, I never ended up going to grad school. People assume that I did. I didn't. I graduated with honors from New York University, class of 1997, commencement speaker, William H. Cosby, PhD, or Bill if you prefer. And I was an academic star at New York University. I had pretty much sucked. Once I got to about fifth grade, I started really not being good. But I had trouble forming normal friendships and interacting, and I would get scared, I would get nervous, I was anxiety ridden. It wasn't by accident. I clearly had difficulty making eye contact as I was on the spectrum. And my father, as a younger person, despite his aptitudes, from what I understand, he was even more awkward than I was. Because I at least kind of looked like an athletic kid. My dad was athletic, but he looked like an accountant when he was 12. Dad, I'm sorry, but it's true. But if I had been asked the question, and this is where you get into the real deep philosophical musings, not so much the everything everywhere all at once, where your life has infinite possibilities, that there are infinite left or right turns or go straight, which charts dozens, hundreds, thousands, infinite runouts of your own life. But if I had been presented with two, when I reached my early 20s, and spoiler alert, I made it into my early 20s. I'm gonna tell you something. You're gonna think I'm making this up just to get ratings on a podcast, but nobody really cares about this. Okay? I went through my entire NYU career. Right? I started at New York University in the fall of '94, graduated '97. Right? There were a lot of young women that I was interested in. I was not able to get past square one, not even first base. I was not able to get past square one, despite the fact that I had had friends as a younger person. I was so nervous. I was so scared all the time. I believed at 21, I wasn't thinking in terms of a screenwriting career yet, but I believed that I was never going to be able to do that. I was never going to be able to interact with, let's say, someone I had a crush on, that I was never going to be able to interact with them in a normal fashion, and I was never going to get anywhere because my younger life showed me, I thought that the problem was that I looked funny. Maybe I did, but hey, when we're kids, we look funny. That's part of it. But it was my attitude, it was my behavior, it was my inability to interact in a normal fashion. So by the time I started to see myself as a screenwriter, it was just about the time that I was finishing my coursework at New York University. I had sent out a couple of screenplays that had gotten some good notices. A guy had optioned my first screenplay, and he said, I think we can do something with this. It ended up not going any further than that. But then as I talked about probably a couple of months ago, I did a book adaptation of Alfred Sloat's The Biggest Victory, and a lot of people who read that script loved it, but there were issues, rights issues. Sloat's agent wanted an astronomical amount for the rights to his book, and neither myself nor the guy who wanted to make the movie had a studio deal and wasn't just going to drop $10,000 or $15,000. Hell, I'm the writer, he's the producer. We're the ones who are supposed to get paid. We're not supposed to pay out to make the movie and make the writer and the agent even more money. But that's the way that it went down. Now, half a lifetime ago, if you rewind the clock, if you could interview me at age 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, like in that range of like 5 years post-college, but before I was pushing 30, because I feel like 27 is not exactly, I mean, maybe you think it's pushing 30. I feel like 28, 29, you're pushing 30, but that's, again, neither here nor there. But I thought that I knew what my life was going to be. My life was going to be, I'm going to make a lot of money, get some level of acclaim, accolades, maybe one of my niche scripts ends up getting produced and I win some kind of minor awards, I was never going to be a name. Nobody was going to know me. They might somebody like me might remember a name of a screenwriter while watching a movie. But I thought that I was going to be a professional success in the movie business, but I was going to do it by myself. And by that, I don't mean I wouldn't have a writing partner. I mean, I did not believe that I was going to have anything approaching a normal, whatever that is, but a functional social life. Let's put it that way. So if I had been presented with two possible paths in life, okay, and let's just say that the higher power of your choice, I'll leave it up to you, dear viewer and dear listener, the higher power of your choice approaches 23 to 27-year-old me and says, there are only two paths in front of you, kiddo, just two. There's not a million, there's two. And I want you to choose which one is going to be your life. Path A. Path A, you become a very successful screenwriter. You actually end up being more professionally successful than your dad, which would seem to be really unlikely, but we'll just go with it. But you are not ever going to be able to form the kind of deep interpersonal connections that you have wanted since you were a kid. You are going to be a professional star, and your personal life is going to be a shambles. You are going to be living alone. I didn't have pets at the time. You're going to be living alone, and you will believe you will always be alone. That's path A. Now, I think I would have signed up for that because I believed that the part about me being by myself and being unable to get anywhere, I thought that was guaranteed. I thought that was a 100% certainty. So it's not like that part of it would have been anything that I didn't already believe in my marrow. I do not have the ability to do this. This is a null set. This is a 0% here. I believe this body, mind, and soul. And there are people in my life, casual friends, people I knew from Bebs, they would, not that anybody is going to come down here and testify to this, but they would say, that's exactly how he used to think. He would tell you stuff with a straight face, and you kept waiting for him to indicate that he was just fucking with you, but I guess he wasn't, because here he is all these years later, he's still talking about it. So, path A. Professional success, probably millions of dollars. Name and lights. Some people know who I am, but I'm a working screenwriter. And my dear old dad is very proud that his son has somehow managed to eclipse him. And my mom just kvelling nonstop, all of that. My sister, everybody's happy. But then the higher power of your choice says, okay, now here's path two. Here's path two. Path two, you don't actually make it as a writer. You don't make it as a screenwriter. You have a couple of projects that seem that they're going to go somewhere, but they don't really work out. And you work on one individual screenplay for a dozen years, and you become so frustrated, you quit because you can't take it anymore. You can't continue to listen to people tell you what's wrong with your work. You get fed up, and when you're in your mid-40s, you are going to leave the movie business entirely. Now, at that point, if I was being told that, that would be pretty depressing. Path A is looking good. At least I'm making money, right? At least I get some level of acclaim and fame and notoriety in a good sense. But then the higher power looks at me and he says, here's the caveat. This is not a bad caveat. You still don't really have that many money worries relative to most of the people you know in path B. And you will have a social life. You will learn. You will learn how to interact properly with other people. You will figure shit out that you did not even believe was a plausible reality. You will improve. You're not always going to be this person who can't do anything other than look at the ground in the company of a crush, look at the sky, stare into space, speak too quickly for someone to understand. Treat each individual situation of having a crush on somebody and trying to ask for their number. You will no longer treat each situation as if it is the end of the world as we know it and I don't feel fine. You will, with practice, you will learn, you will improve, and you will get to live an entirely different life than you think, but you will be happier. You will be happier because you will get to experience more of what you believed was normalcy. That you crave interaction, you crave deep connections, you're going to get them. You're going to get them. You're just not going to become a famous writer. You're not going to make a ton of money. You're going to have to end up doing something else. But even with that, you're not going to have that much pressure on you. Certainly not like most of the people you know. Which would you choose, Jer? As the higher power would intone, which would you choose? You want path A? You never improve. You're the same person at 22, and you're going to be the same person at 51. Non-stop whining and complaining. The word can't. I can't do this, can't do that, can't do this. The only thing that you're going to be good at is making money as a writer. The rest of your life is not going to be good. You are going to be miserable living in your $2 million home. Maybe by then you'll get a pet, but you are not going to be happy. You will not experience even more than a brief pocket of happiness. Pathway B, you are going to get to experience a lot of happiness. There's going to be ups and downs. There will be heartbreak. There might be multiple experiences of heartbreak. But you will live. You will actually take advantage of your life. You will make the kinds of friends and romantic partners that younger you did not believe could happen. It will. If me at 23 was proffered if that was what was in front of me, I don't know what I would have picked. Because back then, I just thought that path A was guaranteed. I didn't think that the other version of my life, well, that can't be. Well, yeah, it can. You just have to get out of your own way a little bit. You have to practice. Now, here's the other thing, and this is very important. Again, we're not going to name any names of politicians. This is not about politicians. This is about a mindset. And this is about, in certain ways, it is unfortunate that I grew up before the social media era, but in other ways, I'm exceedingly lucky that I grew up before the social media era. So people with the kind of morose and depressive thought process that I had as a younger person when I didn't believe it was possible that any girl could like me back. It was that simple. I didn't have online support groups of other guys in that same boat, turning into raging misogynists. I didn't even have the opportunity to do anything or see anything like that because it didn't exist. And now in 2025, and really for at least the last 10 to 15 years, it does exist. Normally support groups are good, but this kind of thing where you have angry 14 or 15-year-olds, as I was a very angry 14 or 15-year-old, why does this person get this and I don't? Why are they better than me? Wrong and wrong. You can. You just don't think you can. And they are not better than you. When you're in your teens, whether it's 2025, whether it's 1988, your mind races a million miles a minute. You're jealous as hell of almost anybody who you think has it better than you do. Hell, when I was 6 years old, I was the last kid that I knew in my friend group who didn't have a home video game system. You know, in the immortal words of Justin Timberlake, cry me a fucking river. Bro, why don't you shut up? That's what I would tell my younger self. There is so much more than you know. But I sulked, and my anger and my rage went inward, but it did not poison me. And I feel like nowadays, somebody with my exact characteristics, it would be an upset if they were ever able to have anything approaching a healthy social existence. And that's because there are so many really unscrupulous people. You know, one of my friends calls it rage farming. There's a lot of rage farming on the internet. And, well, there was no internet when I was an impressionable, angry lad. Didn't exist. The first time I was ever on the internet was fall of '94 when I began work at New York University. The the Bopes Library, the computers there were wired, they must have had, it's so stupid to even contemplate. If you're under 30, what I'm about to say might as well be a different language. They must have had hundreds of phone numbers. The Bopes Library probably registered hundreds of phone numbers for each individual computer to have its own internet hookup, dial up, just like that. But that was my first experience being on the internet. I was already 20. I was pushing 21. So an entire, soon to be, not even culture, a dominant thread of culture didn't exist. Now, I was still struggling at that age, but I had matured enough to understand, and not just because I saw a lot of movies, that turning my disappointment, turning my feelings of helplessness and hopelessness, turning them against other people, no. This is me. This is on me. And I had the help of really good therapists who cared. And I understand there are some people who don't believe, Tom Cruise, you don't know the history of psychoanalysis. I do all that stuff. I wasn't in analysis. I was in good old-fashioned Jungian style psychotherapy. But I benefited from having doctors who actually gave a shit. And they were committed to helping me to learn how to interact. This is not Yoda saying you must unlearn what you have learned. I needed to learn it in the first place. I was remedial level. I was slow to develop. But because I was not exposed to other bad stuff, my head didn't get twisted any worse than I could have twisted it myself. And eventually, as I reached my late 20s, I didn't really get very much going romantically, but at least I was able to make friends. At least I was able to make lasting and people I've been friends with for decades. It was very difficult for me to even do that much. And then by the time I got into my mid-30s, most people who were meeting me for the first time, let's say when I was 35, 36, 37, they wouldn't have immediately said, hey, what's wrong with this guy? The guy's a fucking weirdo. There were a lot of people when I was younger who I'm pretty sure said some variation on that. But I reached a point with practice where what used to scare the shit out of me no longer bothered me at all. No big deal. I'm good. I can handle this. I can handle rejection because everybody gets rejected. It's part of life. We don't want it to be part of life. We would like if people always said the word yes instead of the word no, if we wanted them to say yes, that is. But it's not how it goes. And I knew that then. I took things, not that I took things too seriously, but each individual moment seemed bigger than it was. And this is where, when you have had a lot of varied experiences, when you have lived out loud, as I would say, I've been living out loud for the last 7 years at least. When you have done that, you look back on earlier events and you realize you made a lot more of this than you should have, and that, and this, and that, and this, and that. Hurts when you want someone to say yes and they say no. In business, do you know how many different times it looked like so-and-so was going to pick up this script, that script? Yeah, our slate is just about full. I don't think we have room for another baseball project. Words to that effect. But whether it's business, whether it's your personal life, there are always going to be those times where people say no. You have to allow for it. You have to accept it. It's part of it. It's part of the process. It's a never-ending learning experience. I'm just grateful that I got to go on the ride. Bill Hicks, who died so young, that famous bit that he did, Just a Ride, he was saying to get as much out of life as humanly possible. Get as much out of every day as you can. Don't waste time being angry. Circumstances you can't control. Do something about the circumstances that you can. And you have a greater ability to affect change, or at least I had a greater ability to affect change than I ever imagined. I just had to kind of put my mind to it and remove the negative thoughts that were telling me, you're wasting your time, you can't do this. No, I'm going to try anyway. And lo and behold, doors began to open up. As professional doors closed, personal ones, social ones opened. And if you want me to talk and bring up a movie that's actually not that far off my own life, it would be Matchstick Men. Now, I was not a con artist or con artiste. Nicolas Cage's protagonist in that film is very wealthy. He has a lot of money, but he's a basket case. He's a basket case. He's way worse than I was. He has the kind of obsessions like Melvin Udall, the character Jack Nicholson plays in As Good as It Gets. Can't step on a crack, can't do this, can't do this, can't do this. He has that kind of life. He has no social life. He's good at making money. He's good at artfully and almost gently taking money from people. But he can't interact in a normal fashion because he's such a basket case. Well, spoiler alert, by the end of the movie, he doesn't really have that much money anymore, but he's happy because he is now capable of interpersonal connections. Whereas when the movie opened, didn't really seem as if it was in the cards for him. And now it is. So my life has completely turned around, and I never would have imagined that I would have so many individual moments of joy, of happiness, of real connection, of people who will always be important figures in my life that I didn't even know who they were 2 decades ago. You just have to keep, I don't want to say keep the faith, but if you struggle, and we all struggle from time to time, you just don't quit. Don't give up. Don't assume that you can't. Figure out a way that you can. You might surprise yourself. It's better to shoot for the stars. It's better to overshoot than to not give yourself an opportunity in the first place. And yeah, sorry for this kind of rambling and melancholy episode. I hope you enjoyed it. But when we get sick and we feel like we're going to feel like crap forever, we sometimes start ruminating and philosophizing. And that's what this is. I've gotten a lot of lucky breaks. I've gotten more lucky breaks than the next 100 people. I freely admit it. Because I had 2 parents who, despite the fact that they had their moments where they didn't exactly parent myself or my sister as effectively as they could have, there were 2 parents who really loved us. In the case of my mom, she's actually on a cruise right now that she just left today. But 2 parents who really loved us and seemed to devote their lives to making sure that their children, as my dad would say, you'll always have a roof over your head, Jer. You'll always have clothes on your back, and you'll always have food on the table. If I do my job well enough, you won't have to worry about that kind of stuff. Well, I am grateful for my dear old dad, who unfortunately has been gone more than 2.5 years now. I'm grateful for my crazy, amazing mom. And I'm grateful that I got the help that I needed when I needed it, and that I was not steered into a destructive direction when I was at, we can say it, a very impressionable age. I'm happy that I was a product of my time and not a product of a different time. This has been episode 500, unfucking believable, of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your Sunday evening here with me in New York. And if you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then,